Hey everyone, DJ Short here from NBC Sports EDGE slash Roto World, and opening day is almost here, 2 days away. Welcome back for another fantasy baseball Q&A. I'll be here every Tuesday, right at this time, 1 p.m. Eastern, throughout the season. We did our first chat last week, which was a lot of fun. So I'll be here today for about 30, 40 minutes, depending on how many questions we get. But I anticipate this should be a pretty active one. Of course, roster starting to come together. Anthony Volpe made the Yankees. Yay. Jordan Walker made the Cardinals. Awesome. Grayson Rodriguez did not make the Orioles, and that's a boo, obviously. So interesting to see all those things come together. I actually thought if you would have asked me at the beginning of spring training who was most likely to make their teams out of that trio, I would have put Rodriguez first. So pretty interesting comments from Mike Elias, the GM of the Orioles. Let me see if I can pull it up here real quick, but really interesting quote here. So Elias said he was not ready to jump into a major league rotation, just not getting past the fourth inning. And we know what he's capable of. I wasn't expecting this. We were hoping he would show up as a better version of himself than I think we got here. We just had five other guys who were more deserving at this point in time. Maybe that's true. I don't know. He did get roughed up a bit to finish out the spring. He started out really hot, but didn't finish particularly strong. There's a couple of issues at play. Obviously, the Orioles would deny if there's any service time issues going on here. But also, he didn't throw a lot of innings last year. And if the Orioles really view themselves as a contender, which, whatever, I think they should have been more active during the offseason. But if they really view themselves as a contender, like Grayson Rodriguez has got to be part of that mix in, September. So how is he going to get there? I think that's going to be a constant question for the Orioles. I don't think it's going to be long before we see Rodriguez. Maybe this is some tough love to motivate him, but usually that's not the kind of stuff you hear from a GM when a prospect spends pretty much all of camp with the team and gets sent down. So I did think that was kind of odd. So I wanted to give you guys a little bit of time to get in here and get your questions in here at the top. I didn't want to just jump into things, but feel free to submit your questions. Can be last minute fantasy draft questions, players that you're excited about for this coming season, late round sleepers, that kind of stuff. But also just more baseball in general, if you want to talk predictions, award winners, all that kind of stuff. We are just 2 days away from opening day. It's going to be a ton of fun. All these new rules. I don't think we know quite what we're getting into. I wrote a column there in the off season about these changes, and I said it's basically an experiment in real time, and we're going to figure out the repercussions. Maybe some not great, maybe some will be wonderful. Certainly, games ending in 2 hours and 30 minutes would be great. All right, so we'll start at the top here with Lou. So he asked, "Do you think Esteury Ruiz hits enough to be a stolen base force? He's the lowest ranked of my 7 outfielder only options. Michael Harris, Teoscar Hernandez, Stephen Kwan, Jake McCarthy, Oscar Colas, and Seiya Suzuki, and I need to drop one." So I think I would maybe drop Colas if I had to drop one of them. I think Ruiz has a chance to, the A's being as they are, I could talk more about that in a second. He should play every day, Ruiz. They made that big 3-team trade, trading away Sean Murphy. Ruiz is the big piece there coming back. He should absolutely play every day. I mean, unless he's hitting like 180 in May or something, like he should be in the lineup every day. I think his numbers last year in AAA were elevated by the Pacific Coast League and everything that comes along with that. But yeah, I mean, the A's are going to be struggling for offense. They're going to be thirsting for offense this season, and they're going to let probably Ruiz run wild. He's played under these rule changes too in the minor leagues, knows how to take advantage of it. Speed you can't question. Colas, I'm not sure. I guess there's more replacement value there. He's more replaceable, perhaps. Maybe I'll eat these words and he's going to be great. But on the surface, I think he could be a bit more replaceable, certainly than these other guys you mentioned. So I think I would go with Ruiz there. And the other thing about the A's, so Christian Pache did not make the A's opening day roster, which is super interesting, obviously, because he's out of options. Um, so they're going to go with Connor Capel, Brent Rooker on their opening day roster. And Pache just didn't get much of a chance with the A's, kinda a little weird. He actually had a pretty good spring, but only 332 plate appearances in the majors, 156 hitter, 439 OPS, 97 strikeouts against just 17 walks, but just 24 years old. The defense in center field is elite. We know that. The arm strength is great. Um, he was 94th percentile in outs above average last year, 77th percentile in outfielder jump, 83rd percentile in sprint speed. Was one of the big pieces in the Matt Olson trade with the Braves as well. Shea Langeliers, Ryan Cusick, and Joey Estes were the other parts of that deal. Um, a little weird to see the A's just give up on him this quickly. I'm sure someone's gonna scoop him up. Any number of teams would be interested in him as a project, a former top prospect who is probably, more a better real life prospect than a fantasy prospect. But uh, certainly odd with a team who shouldn't contend this year. I didn't really understand that one. Uh, okay, Jim up here. What are the odds that Herman Marquez gets traded? And if he does, where do you see him going? I mean, if he gets traded, he's probably going to a contender, right? It's obviously hard to say. We're probably months out from knowing where that destination might be, but just getting out of Coors Field makes him immediately viable in a mixed league. We know he can miss bats. On the road, you could generally use him and trust him enough to use him, but in mixed leagues, it's tricky, and it has been for quite some time. Uh, Impossible for me to say where he might go, but a name to watch, and that's a good call. Um, the Rockies are the Rockies, though. I'll just say that, and I wouldn't be surprised if they just kept them around because that's what they do. Mario up here, better fantasy pick: Andres Munoz or Joan Duran. Uh, this is a tough one because they're kind of right in that same area, right? Where it's like, are they going to close? Are they going to be the high leverage fireman type of role because there are alternatives in each situation there? I would go with Munoz. I think he could strike out 100 plus batters this year and be useful even if he's not getting saves. It's almost like getting an extra starter per week uh, with Munoz. I think he's top five reliever in the game right now. Duran could be that guy too in short order. Um, but if I had to put my money down on who could emerge this year, I would say Munoz is the guy. Up next here is the Rays system of churning out surprisingly efficient starting pitcher fantasy production enough to sell you on Zach Eflin or Josh Fleming. Late round flyers, Eflin over Fleming for me. Eflin has at least shown flashes in the past. So we'll see. If their pitching factory can do something there with Eflin because he has shown flashes of being a good pitcher. Some of it for him is about health. So if he can, stay on the field and maybe they tweak something here and there. We know they do that pretty much every year with relievers, but they could tweak something here and there. Um, you know, there could be something there. Jeffrey Springs emerged last year. Drew Rasmussen is a good late round, mid to late round fantasy pick for mixed league rotation. So we probably weren't talking a ton about those guys a year ago, and look at them now. So I wouldn't rule out either of those guys being viable. Question from Lou: does Ahmed Rosario reach another level in his age 27 season? Um, I don't know. I think what we have already is pretty good. Um, but yeah, maybe never reaching quite that. Like he was a top prospect, um, and whereas he should hit for average, makes contact, steals some bases, hits for a little bit of power. Is there more in there from a power perspective? I think speaking from the Guardians' perspective, they certainly hope so. I think there's been some rumors about an extension as well for Rosario. I think it's possible. Um, because when he really connects with one, it's there's some really interesting power in that bat. So maybe there is, but I wouldn't necessarily count on it right now. I think he's um, outside the top 12 fantasy shortstops, sort of in that 12 to 15 range. Not going to hurt you, but not necessarily going to stand out in one area either. How happy are you that Darren Ruff has been cut? Not 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 as happy as you might think. Uh, you know, I think the trade made sense on the surface at the time. I don't think trading 4 players for Darren Ruff makes a lot of sense. That was weird even at the time. But looking at Ruff's career splits, there's a useful player in there somewhere, and that was the bet that the Mets made. It was a poor bet because JD Davis was so great for the Giants down the stretch. If the Mets had gotten that production from Darren Ruff, they might have won the division, and we could have the postseason might have unfolded completely differently. So I think it was. I don't think it was the worst idea to do the trade, but it just didn't work out. And sometimes that happens. So probably better off that both sides turn the page. We'll see what happens with the DH role with the Mets. I think it is kind of wide open this year, and any number of things could happen from Francisco Alvarez to Brett Beatty to Eduardo Escobar. Um, Tommy Pham, Daniel Vogelback. I mean, there's so many guys that could be a factor in the DH spot. Mark Vientos as well. So who knows what's going to happen there? But they do have a lot of options, which I guess is a good problem. Um, all right, question from Rusty. Would you be comfortable with Jordan Walker at third base and Gunnar Henderson at shortstop? Again, these are Yahoo position qualifications for an entire Roto season. They're free keepers. Could shore up other positions. If so, uh, yeah, I love it. I mean, take advantage of that, position eligibility. And Yahoo, some sites are a little more generous than others. That Yahoo happens to be generous, where Mookie Betts qualifies as second base, for example. So, uh, yeah, take advantage of it. I drafted Jordan Walker as my third baseman in a league last night. I later got some backup with Ryan McMahon, who I can also put at second base. So I'm kind of looking to diversify my roster and be flexible in case of injury. Walker will get that outfield eligibility. Gunnar Henderson will, play third. So uh, having these multi-position eligible guys is really really nice. Um, let's see. Oh, before we keep moving along here, I wanted to pop this up here so you guys take a look at this. Um, New MLB season, new rules, new stars. So pair it with the Roto Baseball Draft Guide. Get all the player profiles, rankings, and projections you need to hit your draft out of the park. Go to NBCSportsEdge.com/draft guide and use Pennant25. You see the code right there to save 25% off at checkout. Really, really good deal. We're trying to keep it updated here this week as rosters fall into place. So please check that out. All right. Just sort of answer this question, but do you think Brett Beatty will have an impact this season with the Mets? Yes, I think he will, definitely. When it happens, hard to say. I think, um, some of these decisions out of spring training is simply about rosters and players maybe using an opt out and a minor league deal, that kind of stuff. You want to have as many options as you can on the table. I think that's some of the motivation with the Mets. Eduardo Escobar, is a veteran, has a lot of experience. I think some more time, more game exposure at third base in the minors for Brett Beatty is not the worst thing in the world. He had a great camp. He did strike out a lot. Did a batting average on balls in play above 500 as well. So, like, yes, it's nice to see the results, and he was very impressive. I actually saw him hit batting practice before a game, and saw a game as well. And the batting practice session was, far and above more impressive than anybody else that I saw. Just the way the ball explodes off his bat. He's going to be an impact player. I would say he'll be up by May, um, and be mixed league worthy right away. Maybe Eduardo Escobar moves into more of that, DH role. There was even talk about exposure in left field. So, yeah, I don't think Beatty's the worst stash pick in a fantasy draft right now, because I think we'll see him pretty soon, and he's going to be a major factor for the Mets this season. Up next here, Franmil Reyes. Will he get regular playing time in KC? Um, I think if Reyes gets off to a hot start, he could have the DH job all year. It's really just as simple as that. If he gets off to a slow start, maybe the Royals will move on. Like, that's really how I see it. Um, but Reyes is just a couple of years removed from hitting 30 plus homers. So, hey, I mentioned this in the Circling the Bases podcast yesterday. Myself and Scott Pianowski host that show Mondays and Wednesdays. Make sure to subscribe wherever you get your podcast. But we talked a little bit about the Royals lineup yesterday. Michael Massey was the subject at the time, but I also mentioned Franmil Reyes. I mean, late round, deeper league, where you have a couple of utility spots. Like, why not? Why not take a chance on Reyes's power to surprise and for a rebound here? He's still young, and there's a lot of thump in that bat. So, um, yeah, hard to say if he'll get regular playing time, but I think it all depends on how if he comes out strong here. Let's see. Next up, can Brusdar get Gratterall seize the closer role in Los Angeles? How long until Daniel Bard loses the closer role in Colorado? So, I would put Evan Phillips at the top of the board there in LA, as he should be. Daniel Hudson. I think going into camp there were some hopes that he would be healthy. He's not right now. Coming off knee surgery, it's going to be a little while. So I put Phillips number one. Gratterall, maybe. Certainly he has a good arm, and he's capable at some point. But Phillips would be the pick for me right now. How long until Bard loses the closer role? I think Bard has been a fade for most people in fantasy drafts this spring, because it's like what he did last year was pretty incredible, pitching in Colorado. And hey, it's a great story. Got a contract extension. I think that matters for a team like the Rockies. I think it's going to be a longer leash because of the contract there. But if if he flips back the other way, Coors Field's a dangerous place to pitch. He has been. Last year, he induced more ground balls, which is a big positive pitching in Coors Field. So maybe that helps him a little bit. But yeah, I think it's obvious. You could see why people are fading, because it's closer in Colorado, not the best place to be. Dinelson Lamet, I guess, is the name to watch in that bullpen if something's to happen. Another question here from Lou. Better option for SP4 or 5? Dustin May, Hunter Brown, Freddie Peralta. I'd go with May and Peralta because, Peralta's done it. I think there are questions about the health, and totally justified, but he's done it. He's been on the fringe of fantasy ace-dom, basically. So I'm into that. Dustin May, I think he has all the makings of a fantasy ace. I think a year from now, maybe we're talking Dustin May's a top 25 fantasy starter. Like, he has that in him. A great situation. I like Hunter Brown too, but I think May's, it's quite possibly his time to make that leap. With Brown, I have a little bit of questions about the control. We'll see how it goes. But yeah, I would go with Peralta, and yeah, I'd go with Peralta and May there. So, Rusty here. Favorite mid-round closer that feels somewhat safe for saves? It's tough because we've lost two significant ones in recent days. Edwin Diaz, of course, out for the season. Raisel Iglesias with a shoulder issue. Doesn't look like it's going to be a super long one, but we were talking about being more aggressive for closers this season than we have in the past. Does these injuries make it more likely you're going to be aggressive early, or do you start to say, hey, everyone's in the same boat, and you're playing it a bit more safe? It's a good question. David Robertson, like he's in recent drafts I've seen, he's like the 18th closer off the board. I think he's going to be the guy. I mean, maybe come July, the Mets do something else if he struggles, but Mets are going to win 90 games. So I would go with David Robertson right now. Scott Barlow, maybe too. Always the chance he could be traded mid-season, which you don't want. But skills wise, I think he's very good. I'm not worried about Aroldis Chapman. I think he might be cooked. So we'll see. But yeah, David Robertson, and as of today, maybe because a little bit of uncertainty, he looks like a value to me right now. Higher pick. Thanks for the question, Josh. Higher pick in 2024, Bobby Witt Jr. or Jazz Chisholm? Great question. Witt's already being taken in the second round, maybe late first round in some deeper leagues. Jazz Chisholm, of course, he was hurt, half of last season, so he's kind of more like a fourth rounder. Making the transition to center field. Does that impact him at the plate this year? We'll see. Does that impact his health? That's an open question as well. It's a tough one to answer, but I'm all in on Jazz Chisholm this year. What he did last year, made some strides with this approach, but the power and speed numbers he put up, like if he did play a full season, it's hard to project these kind of things. You can drive yourself crazy doing that, but if he played a full season, we're talking about first round value. I'm not sure Witt's going to do that. I think in some sense we're paying for something that Witt hasn't done yet, whereas Jazz is going pretty much where he should be based on what he's done to this point. So I'd rather have Jazz Chisholm this year than Witt, if that makes any sense. But if I had to make a prediction right now, I would say Jazz is the higher pick next year, and I'm really excited to see him this season. Let's see. Will Ezekiel Tovar get on base enough for steals this year? I don't know. It's hard to say. He just hasn't had a large amount of at bats in the majors. I think he was up the final weekend for the Rockies last year, so it's impossible to say how he'll fare in this first extended opportunity. I'm excited to see him playing regularly for the Rockies, and I think he's good enough defensively that they can live with some initial struggles, some ups and downs, which are to be expected with a rookie. But in comparing where Anthony Volpe's going with where Tovar is going, like the hype is all with Volpe right now, and Volpe is probably today. I don't know if you did a fantasy draft today, Jordan Walker and Anthony Volpe are probably going in the same area. I would say anything post 100, probably they're going to go. But Tovar is probably going after the top 200. And it's not out of the realm of possibility, and of course, propped up by Coors Field, that Tovar and Volpe could put up similar counting stats this season. Maybe Volpe has, better on base skills, better approach, but we're speaking strictly home runs, stolen bases, RBIs, runs scored. I wouldn't be shocked if Tovar was comparable. So I think that's something to keep an eye on if you're looking late for middle infielder. I probably wouldn't necessarily trust Tovar to be a starting shortstop in a standard mixed league, but yeah, if you're looking for late round value, I think Tovar could be a pretty decent one. Willie Adames or Jeremy Pena better this year? Well, I've mentioned I'm a big fan of Jeremy Pena's biceps. The dude is just totally jacked. Does that mean it's going to translate to like 30 homers this year? Maybe, probably not. But yeah, Willie Adames. I mean, I think he's a cut above Pena right now, just because he's done it. He's had that kind of a pretty much borderline elite fantasy season for a fantasy shortstop. And since he's arrived in Milwaukee, the power has been ridiculous, and he's still in a very hitter friendly venue there in Milwaukee. Not saying Pena is in a good place for power either, and a good lineup for that matter. Maybe not as good now with Jose Altuve out for a couple of months, but I think Adamas would be my pick, and the average draft position is indicating as much right now. Mark with a question: Fave later closer, Clay Holmes, Jose Leclerc, Kendall Graveman, and then second question here: Does Garrett Mitchell get enough at bats to be a factor? Um, Clay Holmes is safer. The Yankees are going to win 90 plus games. Like that's the way to go. Jose Leclerc, like the Rangers want to win this year. You know what I mean? Like all the money that's been invested in that roster, most recently with Jacob Degrom, uh, they're going for it. So if Leclerc falters, I think they could make a quick change there. And there's some interesting options at least in that Rangers bullpen. Kendall Graveman, I think it hinges on the health of Liam Hendricks. Of course, he has bigger things to be focused on right now, and we wish him all the best in his recovery. Uh, but assuming Graveman has the role, I think he could be fine. Um, but that's unclear right now. So yeah, I think Holmes is the better play. And I think we mentioned there was a question a few minutes ago about a favorite kind of mid round closer. It's kind of surprising how low Clay Holmes is going in some fantasy drafts. I still think there's some value there with him. Two, does Garrett Mitchell get enough ABs to be a factor? Yeah, I have questions about him. You look at his numbers last year. I mean, the batting average on balls in play was like through the roof. He struck out a ton. There's some pop and speed there, obviously. So you're chasing after that. You're chasing after the lineup and the ballpark, that kind of stuff. But the Brewers have some interesting outfield prospects in the minors. So Sal Frelick is right on the edge. Had a chance to make the opening day roster, didn't happen. Joey Weimer is another one, more of a slugger type, um, who should see time in the majors this year as well. So uh, maybe there's a window here for Mitchell to really stamp his place um, in this lineup here in Milwaukee. We'll see. I think as far as late round flyers go, um, perfectly reasonable option. So. All right. Probably be here for another 10, 15 minutes. So if you want to get some more questions in, feel free to do that now. Reminder here just to download the Roto World app to receive breaking player news all season long. Stay ahead of the competition by favoriting players on your roster, get the latest injury updates, player news, and much more delivered right to your phone. It's available in your app store today. So definitely go and check that out. I would recommend, as soon as you're done your fantasy draft, start, favoriting those players. You can get some updates here in advance of the season getting underway. I need one of these three to start next week. Which one do you like best? I think that maybe that's Webb. I'm not quite sure. Andrew Heaney, Eric Lauer. I haven't really taken a look at the matchup, so I I can't really give you a great answer this time. Assuming that is Webb, I know doesn't he get the Yankees out of the gate, so uh, maybe you lean Andrew Heaney instead. If healthy, I think Heaney's going to be mixed league relevant this season. So, all right. Up next, Chris, with Grissom being optioned, thoughts on a time frame when he'll be called up. So Vaughn Grissom, during the offseason, the expectation was like he'd get this starting shortstop job. I mean, the Braves waved goodbye to Dansby Swanson, got this big contract with the Cubs. Ron Washington was working with Vaughn Grissom with this transition. There were some questions about his defense. And I guess those questions remain even after, the hard work that he put in during the offseason. I think everyone's pretty confident he's going to hit. It's just a matter of whether he's a shortstop, and now he'll get that game experience in AAA. Pretty shocking decision ultimately. So now Orlando Arcia is the main guy there at shortstop, and the Braves are confident he can play that position and play it well. I think it's just a matter of, well, I guess two factors. Do the Braves feel good about Grissom's progress defensively at shortstop in AAA? I think that's probably the most significant factor. But like, if Orlando Arcia is hitting, 200 on May 15th, they make a move regardless of Grissom's progress. And injuries can always be a factor too. Ozzy Albies coming off a year where he was hurt a lot. Who knows, you know? So he should still be someone you're thinking about in a mixed league. But yeah, I thought going into the spring he was a little bit overvalued, because there was more questions than I think a lot of people were willing to admit, at least in the fantasy community. Um, so, question from Jeff: your expectations for Yankees rookie Anthony Volpe? You know what? I have a feeling they're going to be unfair. You know, because he's going to be the youngest shortstop to start for the Yankees on opening day since Derek Jeter, and like as soon as you say that, like people get you know thoughts in your head, and you're in New York, so what do you think is going to happen with that? You know, um, my expectations are he'll hit low in the order initially. We know he's going to hit ninth on opening day. But I heard Aaron Boone say during an in-game interview yesterday that he could see him working his way up to being a leadoff man if like DJ LeMahieu gets a day off. And as he gets more experience, he could move up to the top of the order. If that happens, you're talking about the volume in the Yankees lineup in Yankee Stadium. That could be really, really fun. I think I'm going to set my baseline expectations like 10 to 15 homers, 20 to 25 steals, 70 runs scored as a rookie, batting average in that 250 range. Like, I think that's what we should look at, but that's assuming he's batting ninth. If he doesn't, we could be talking about a totally different situation. But um, Volpe, from like everybody I've talked to, everything I've observed, comments of the players and the manager, he's a baseball freak, baseball nut. Um, Always looking for ways to improve. Uh, I think I think he has something special there, but I do think we have to be a little bit careful about the pressure on a a young guy. But grew up a Yankees fan. I think it's awesome for Yankees fans. Very exciting, especially because there were a lot of complaints during the offseason that this was largely the same team they brought back. Other than like Carlos Rodon. Um, so I think it's something fresh in there. Adds a speed dynamic. I'm sure the Yankees will try to take advantage of these new rules. I think a lot of teams will. Um, but yeah, it's kind of a team where there wasn't a lot of juice there as far as speed in recent years, kind of station to station, strikeouts, power. So he adds this dimension to this team, and I think it's going to make them a lot more exciting watch for sure. Question from Rusty: Freeman, Vlad, Alonso in that order for you in Roto. Um, I think I had Vlad, Freeman, Alonso in my rankings, but Vlad and Freeman are very close. So um, you could pitch me, either way. I think Freeman, power wise, there's a cap there. I think he's incredibly safe. Like if you're talking about fantasy floor, Freeman is the safest. Consistent year in, year out. Vlad has the higher ceiling, and we saw it a couple of years ago. You know, so if you want to shoot for the moon, I think Vlad is that guy. If you want to play it a little bit safer, Freeman's that guy. Alonzo, one of the safest power hitters in the game. It's not impossible he's going to hit 50 plus homers again. Matt Olson is right there with Alonzo, though. And I think he's the value pick at first base this season. Maybe not as much now that he's hit 8 home runs this spring. But Matt Olson is my pick to lead the majors in home runs this year. I made that futures play a couple of weeks back, and I feel really good about it now. But I think we're going to see a big season um, from Matt Olson this year. Second season in Atlanta, getting more comfortable. You look at the power metrics last year, was incredibly promising. As far as future production, it's just the strikeout rate has been up and down for Matt Olson in his career. So just a matter of maybe since he's been going bouncing year in year out as far as that strikeout rate, maybe this is one of those good years. We shall see. So I have a couple of minutes left here. Any other questions on your mind, please feel free to send them along here before I close up shop. for today. Once again, I'll be here every Tuesday, 1 p.m. Eastern time during the season to answer your fantasy questions or just baseball in general. I'm happy to do that as well. Opening day just 2 days away. Next up here, question from Dave. Thoughts on Jack Flaherty and/or Graham Ashcraft being reliable starting pitchers? Flaherty, I think it comes down to health. I mean, he has that reputation, and it's not too long ago, obviously, that, or maybe it isn't long ago. It's like 3 years ago that we were envisioning him as being, um, fantasy ace. Health has played a factor over the past couple of years. He just hasn't been able to stay on the field, and he's shown flashes this spring, but he's also been hit hard at times. He's someone I've generally faded in drafts this year, just because I'm not sure. I'm really not sure. Um, but he's going higher than Graham Ashcraft, and I can understand why, because Flaherty has done it, um, and Ashcraft has not done it yet. Ashcraft, I believe, has added a sweeper to his arsenal, has the velocity. The results have been good this spring as well. Um, so yeah, I think as far as late round flyers go, Ashcraft is a very intriguing guy, and that's a Reds rotation with a lot of interesting arms. At least that top three is really fun. Hunter Green, Nick Lodolo, Graham Ashcraft. The final two spots not quite as exciting, but I think the Reds could be a better team than a lot of people realize. They've got a lot of infield prospects on the way. They got Spencer Steer at third base to begin the year. Will Myers was signed during the offseason. Will Benson has been a breakout guy this spring. And if you're looking for an outfielder in a deeper league, I think Will Benson is a decent option. So they've got, and Jonathan India is a bounce back guy. Like there's some interesting stuff on that team. Tyler Stevenson was hurt a lot of last year, but looked great when he was healthy. So there's some value here, and so Alexis Diaz in the closer role for the Reds there too. So there's some interesting pieces to this Reds roster. I think the Cubs could be a sneaky team too. I think their pitching is going to be a lot better than people realize, and their lineup has some fun pieces too. So yeah, don't overlook these teams who may not be a contender on the surface, but have some really good players on them. Nico Horner signed an extension with the Cubs yesterday. I think it buys out his first free agent season, and I've been taking Nico Horner pretty much everywhere this season. He's expected to hit leadoff for the Cubs this year, and I've waited at shortstop to get him. And he's going to be eligible between shortstop and second base. I think you can wait on shortstop this year and get someone like Horner, who's going to give you a lot of nice volume there, and maybe we haven't seen his career high in stolen bases yet. Final question here. Do you expect Jake McCarthy to be a full-time player? I certainly hope so. I've drafted him as such. I was in a league last night where I drafted Jake McCarthy. I think right around 97, 100 range, somewhere in there. So I think I drafted him as my second or third outfielder. Can't remember off the top of my head. I think it was my second outfielder. Also got Tatis earlier in the draft, who of course could play um, or will eventually qualify in the outfield if he doesn't initially in Yahoo. Um, but yeah, I think it's just contingent upon his ability to produce out of the gate at a similar level that he did last year. That's not a guarantee, obviously, because he sort of came out of nowhere. But I think he adds a nice element of speed. I think the Diamondbacks are going to be another one of those like sneaky lineups you should probably try to get a piece of. I've sort of said throughout spring training that McCarthy's like a poor man's Corbin Carroll, and I'll stand by that as of today. I think McCarthy can hit 10 plus homers, steal 30 plus bases this year, assuming he can keep a regular job. But I think it is contingent upon his ability to back up what he did last year. So we'll have to see. Um, I'm gonna have to wrap it up here, but thank you so much for all the questions. This was a lot of fun, and once again, I'll be here every Tuesday during the regular season to take your fantasy questions, break down the latest news, injuries, call ups, whatever might be on your mind. You can follow me on Twitter at DJ Short. And again, subscribe to the Circling the Bases podcast. Thanks so much. Happy opening day, everyone. And I hope to see you very, very soon.